Hello, good evening, everybody. Welcome. I'm back, yes, with another Kirblog this weekend. Been a little while since I did a traditional one like this. Not too long, just, a week or so. Had something important come up, the first episode of Tome Season 2, no big deal or anything. But on that note, since we just had the release of that, I thought it would be good to do this topic that was brought up. This is one that I was sitting on for a little while. It was a very good question, submitted to me by cheerios-the-koopa. Hey Kirb, I have a possible Kirblog topic that you might want to look at. How do you develop characters and make them sound real, not just two-dimensional characters with good dialogue? So this is a very good question because I do have quite a bit to say about developing characters for, well, I guess not just animation, but for stories in general. And I felt that since I was studying on this one for a little while, and I felt that since the episode had just come out, it would be a good time to talk about it. So, since it's relevant to the characters of Tome, as I'll soon get into. So, I've been creating stories and drawing and coming up with stuff like this pretty much for as long as I can remember. I didn't start producing stuff until about a decade ago, but I had, a firm grounding of, storytelling, enough of one that a teenager, I guess, could have, when I went into it, because I've been doing it, forever. What I've found is, from the beginning, I have almost always based my characters in anything I've worked on, whether it's Tome or whatever, off of people that I know, and people that I meet and people that I witness in real life. The first set of characters that I created, weirdly enough, was it was, I'm sure a lot of people are familiar that I make characters based on myself. Like there's Kerberfer, and then there's like Chris Frost from Balancing Act as well. The first characters that I made were a Power Rangers-esque team of all copies of myself, because as you could probably imagine, I didn't have a lot of friends when I was 4. So my team of characters were just different versions of me that were all in a group together. I know, very sad, but they were all different aspects of my personality, kind of divided up into different individuals. You'd almost think that sounds like I have some sort of mental problem. But yeah, so then eventually I finally started making friends and socializing, and into the middle of elementary school or so. I started making some closer friends, including, for instance, Mike Lucas, who has been my best friend since the 3rd or 4th or 5th grade, somewhere around that area, that those wonder years. And Mike was a prime example, because, for instance, Alpha from Tome is a very young, exaggerated version of the young Mike Lucas. When he was a little more shy, a little more awkward, especially around the ladies, and now he is not that at all. In fact, Alpha has kind of evolved much more into his own thing and doesn't really have much of anything to do with Mike. But I digress. So my first group of friends in elementary school and early middle school or so became the basis for my first real set of characters that I had created on my own. I had a lot of just made up villains that were all just kind of inspired by the shows and games that I was watching and playing, etc. So there was a lot of that to draw from, and they were just I'm gonna take over the world because of this, or I want to do this for this reason, or whatever, and or we're going to fight you because of this. And my team, the characters were really just them. I didn't think so much about what are their personalities, because to me, I knew the personalities of my friends so well that I thought it went without saying, as I'm just making up these stories or whatever. But as I got into producing stuff for the internet, that was when I had to really start thinking about it much more. And I guess that would start with the original TV Tome adventures that I produced starting from 2004, believe it or not, a whole decade ago, as of I think only just a couple days ago now. Yeah, that was the first real example of, okay, now I have to actually come up with real characters. Now, and I don't often say, and I still say, that people who watch Tome, who are, following my stuff on YouTube, that, know me for Tome or whatever, it is not a requirement to watch TV Tome Adventures, which was the predecessor to the show, was the original kind of, version of it, and Tome is a kind of reimagining of that series. You do not have to have seen that show to get Tome at all, and I don't recommend it because it's extremely dated. But that was a big learning experience in a lot of different ways, because mainly in the fact that I was telling a big overarching story that had a big population of characters in it, but also I was learning through trial and error what made characters stronger than others. And really there's maybe only like a couple characters from TTA that were even characters. The rest of them were very like cookie cutter, just kind of one note personality. Even the main characters were pretty much like that. But in high school, that was around when I was really beginning to, because in high school, the most that you learn from high school, I think personally, is about people, and not necessarily math, science, social studies, whatever, English. I feel like what you learn more from that part of school in your life is just about people and interacting with others, and the positives and negatives of people. Because my experience in high school and then bleeding into college, that really became the backbone for building fictional personalities. What I was kind of determining was, because I've always been of the opinion, and not everybody agrees with this, but personally, I find that real people make for the best reference of creating characters, because, and I, sometimes you can be exaggerative. You can make them very cartoony or over the top or out there, but there has to be a sense of groundedness within when you make a character. Like, there has to be a human-like relation to them, and sometimes incorporating a trait or two from a person, or sometimes even multiple people, into a character can do wonders for developing them and making them very interesting. What I found, because at first I was just kind of straight up adapting, my friends' personalities into cartoon characters, and then through trial and error I was discovering, okay, if I exaggerate this trait about them, or make this a little more out there, or give them this little extra quirk or something, that can be effective. And then as of late, I've found that, especially now that I work with actors as well, and other creative people, often I incorporate multiple people into the creation of a single character. For balancing act, for instance, like, there's the literally just the me and Mike Lucas characters, and they have little extra bits of things that I took and swapped around from other people. But then like the Earth character, Nick Mantle, is based on a kid that I went to school with since elementary school, around when I met Mike Lucas. But he's developed a lot of traits from Chris Zito, who voices him, for instance, and Mike Rocco, for instance, who I went to school with, and even a little bit of my friend Zach, who I went to high school with and have known for a long time. So Nick is an example of, he's taken on a lot of different traits of many people that have been present in my life. And I guess I would be lying if I said that women I've been in relationships with have certainly impacted a lot of my female characters, not necessarily all in terms of the romantic stuff that goes with them, because love stories are overwrought and they've been done a million times, so what am I adding to it? Even with Alpha and Flame Girl, for instance. But in that case, it became, I met a lot of different women, and I think Alan Sullivan, who created a webcomic many years ago called The Rogues Gallery, he said that he found female characters a lot more interesting to create and write for than male. And I'd be inclined to agree, which is why in future productions beyond Tome, because Tome doesn't have a whole lot of lead female characters, I definitely want to incorporate a more rounded, equally gendered cast, because I would agree, and I've found that some of my favorite characters from Tome are the girls, and I didn't set aside nearly enough time to them that I think that they deserved. But getting off track, sorry. So to tackle the actual question, developing characters and making them interesting and not one note. I feel like sometimes if you let a single gag or a single personality trait dictate them, like I was always kind of critical as a young kid, and I was never really big into the 80s Ninja Turtles because all the characters felt like Michelangelo to me. They all felt like, whoa, dude, totally, and I never really like got the difference between any of them until later when I saw the other incarnations and the movies and things, and then I got a much better sense of who each of them were as characters. And not to mention the later versions of the Ninja Turtles defined them more beyond just the personality traits that they had in the theme song. Which is funny because then apparently before that, all 4 of the Turtles were exactly the same type of character in that comic before the 80s show. So what do I know? But my point is, like, you can find things that work and don't work. One thing that I brought up once, and I had a conversation with Mike Lucas about this, I remember many years ago. Sometimes even bad personality traits can make for interesting material for a fictional character. In one way, like for instance, something in real life that would come across as being really annoying or really awkward, when put under a different circumstance can make, a character very genuine and heartfelt in a way that is very real and relatable of like, oh, I've done that, or oh, I've been there, like, oh, I was embarrassed by that, or like, oh, or sometimes even just, oh, that was cute, or that can be amusing, if you spin it into something. Like, I think I talked briefly about Sailor Moon in one of the other Kirblogs. I'm going to do a whole one about the show down the line, as I mentioned, but Usagi has plenty of personality traits that people in real life would find absolutely and utterly obnoxious, especially in the first season of the show. But as a cartoon character, she's hilarious and super entertaining and super iconic and memorable. And then also on another note, sometimes bad personality traits like that can also really, really make for great villain material. As of late, my, because like I mentioned earlier, a lot of my old villains were just kind of flat out inspired by characters that I grew up with and things, and because I didn't really know any bad people. But as I had more life experience and I got to know people who, were assholes, who would treat other people like shit, who would manipulate other people, who would, bully people, who would, be nasty or oppressive or racist or bigoted or whatever, you can take stuff like that and, in real life, like, those people are assholes and you don't want to know them. But as characters, it can make them very intriguing and entertaining. And sometimes if you also take that and you give them something else that makes them human, you can find that they're relatable even though they're villains, There's villains that you love to hate and that you also just love because you find them very identifiable, even though they're what they're doing is inherently evil, but they don't see it that way. They think that what they're doing is great and it's for the betterment of mankind and blah blah blah, etc. So that's something that I found has been really effective, and I've tried to incorporate a lot of those kind of things into Tome, because I remember, like, I think I talked about this a little bit in the episode 1 commentary, but when I was kind of updating the personalities of the main 5 characters in Tome, I was definitely exaggerating and futzing around with certain personality traits of all 5 of them, and even like rearranging some into other characters that just fit better. And I think that now all 5 of them have become pretty defined, especially as of the start of season 2. I think people seem to understand what it is that each of them are about. I'd like to think, But and even then, like, there's a lot of different things that I want to try with other characters and other ideas that I have down the line, things that kind of break the mold. I've teased about in other Kirblogs, and the one that I mentioned about, creating more female characters. I had a little bit of mention about that earlier too. But yeah, I mean, as I've often said, everything is an exercise, and I'm always striving to improve and do something different and better with each thing that I create. So my bottom line is characters have to be interesting. They don't necessarily have to be like, they don't have to follow a certain rule. I feel I don't think that they have to be exuberantly good or exuberantly evil or exuberantly any one thing. I think that just they have to be interesting and or entertaining, and there's any combination, thousands and millions of combinations of ways that you can do that. My go-to thing is always like real people who inspire me, both positively and sometimes even negatively, are the inspiration that I draw on for that. Tome is a show that's populated with characters that are all, based on, like 99% of them are based on people that I met on that first forum that I went to on TV Tome years ago, and I've developed every single one of those into, a character with their own voice, both, figuratively and literally. And I'm really proud of all of them, and I hope people enjoy those, and I hope that, the other ones that I create and other things down the line will even be a step up from that, so one can hope. But in the meantime, I'm curious to those of you out here, especially those of you who, have ever been creative, or, or whether you produce stuff or not, even if you just have your own personal characters and stories, in the comments, tell me, what is your inspiration for developing characters? Do you feel like you have, only a couple ones that are interesting? Or do you feel like all of your characters could make for interesting stories and things to follow along with? Tell me some of your personal experiences and things, and what it is that you've learned. Do you have real life inspirations? Do you have friends that serve as the bases for your characters as well? Do you draw from something completely different? Let me know. I'm curious, and leave a comment about that. And if you've got ideas for a future Kirblog topic, you can leave a comment about that too, or you can hit me up on Twitter, Tumblr, or Facebook, etc. And that'll do it. So thanks for listening. Hope you guys enjoyed Tome Episode 11, by the way. I'll probably have a link to that somewhere over here as well. Hope you enjoyed it. We worked really, really hard on it, and I'm already working on Episode 12, as I mentioned before. So, thanks so much, everybody, and have a lovely day. Bye-bye.